Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and I'm here to talk to you guys about day 5 of the Servant Strengthening quest from JP's anniversary here. Now, interestingly enough, we get both a Jack and Sanson buff for this one. This is basically our Assassin Day. Obviously, I think a lot of people probably expected Sanson, but I think the Jack one was a little bit more up in the air. I think, to a degree, Jack was who a lot of people hoped would get it. But there were definitely a lot of options. There were definitely even like the AoE assassins that it could have been. So certainly an interesting choice in that regard. We did, again, already go over the Mordred and Matahari buffs, the Parvati and Asterios buffs, and the Robin Hood and Ishtar buff from day 2, as well as the Muramasa and Medea buff from day 1. So we've pretty much gone over all of these. Most of these buffs are very strong so far, so it's definitely a good thing to see. And we're actually going to start out right off the rip with Sanson here first. So basically, Sanson has instant kill chance on his NP. He's always been somebody that at least like kind of specialized as an executioner in taking out like human enemies and stuff like that. And you can basically see that's actually the skill that they chose to upgrade here. So they took his third skill, that was an increase in damage against human enemies by 60%. This is definitely a nice power mod. It is a 3-turn duration. The problem is, what counts as a human enemy is not the same as what counts as an enemy with the man attribute. Man attribute is so much more prolific. It is definitely something that you'll see all the time. Whereas human, unfortunately, usually just comes into play against fodder enemies. So things like soldiers and like either Roman or French soldiers and like various other human type enemies, like say from maybe Shinjuku and stuff like that. So you don't actually have a whole lot of potential uses for this. And usually when they are, they're not a high damage like enemy, like somebody that you're going to need to do a whole bunch against. So they come in and they buff this skill and they actually say, hey, we're going to allow this to increase his own instant kill success rate for 3 turns. And the reason that that is significant is because this adds a 150% modifier to his stuff, in addition to what he already has in his NP. This is also going to increase his own instant kill success rate further against human enemies for 3 turns by an additional 150% rate. And to understand that, basically on screen now you have the calculations that Avalon has done for us. You guys can see, depending on the enemy's native latent death rate, you can determine what the actual kill chance is now, assuming they are either human or not human. And there's definitely things you can do to expand this a little bit more if you started using additional supports to increase death chance. But naturally, you can see with basically an 84% death rate on a human enemy, Sanson can become a guaranteed instant kill against them. This will not apply to things like servants or higher rarity things. Do understand that. But that's where, like, again, if you have a decent instant death rate naturally on the enemy, his instant death modifiers here can practically guarantee it. So that's a decent change. Instant death, a lot of the times in FGO, can be a little bit of a meme. But if you can manage to figure out that a enemy is actually guaranteeably instant killable, it becomes a very, very powerful asset for you. On top of this, again, he still keeps the 60% modifier versus human enemies, but now he gets as well an increase to his own NP damage for 3 turns of 30%. So this is something that could be boosted with Oberon. It's definitely a nice thing just by itself regardless. And then they also add for him something that Sanson never really had before, and that is charge. So Sanson gets a guaranteed 20% charge. You don't even have to level the skill up to get this effect, but let's be honest, if you're going to level any skill on Sanson at this point, it's probably this one. So either way, this is a really, really nice thing for them to give him. It's definitely an interesting buff. I think some people would have maybe liked to have seen the niche expand to like man enemies. I personally would have liked to see that, as it would have at least allowed him to become maybe the 2-star version of Okada Izo, who is already somebody that's really, really effective as a 3-star for that exact reason. Whereas with Sanson's case, the fact that he was restricted against human type enemies has definitely been a little bit more of a problem with that skill. And certainly even with his noble phantasms, this at least will now be able to hit harder, and it's definitely a good change in that regard too. So let me know what you guys think about the Sanson buff, but just kind of going through here. Here is his actual damage numbers, both before and after the buff. He's a low star unit, so we're guaranteed NP5 him, especially since he's permanent. So that's really all we did the number calculations on. As you guys can see, these are neutral numbers, so not effective. This is not against like a rider or something like that. This is just a neutral enemy type. As you can see, Sanson's normal damage before was about 24k. In his evil niche, it was about 38k. In his human niche, again, 38k. But if both, about 52k. Now, post buff, his damage number against normal type enemies did spike by about 7k there. You can see the evil niche as well, about 7k. Same thing with human, and pretty much exact same deal there, just transferring on up with both niches in play, another 7k. So essentially, this is just going to add 7k raw damage, but how much would it do in an actual composition? So we basically have on screen for you guys the best composition that Sanson can pull off, which is, again, because now he has a 20% charge skill, you could manage to 3-turn with him. Obviously, most people are not going to do that, but it's an interesting thing nonetheless. So you can see we can work him with a Koyanskaya and double Oberon, level 100k scope, and maxed out Neo Plug. This is kind of a best possible scenario for Sanson's damage, though these are neutral numbers. And with this, you can see at NP5 there, by wave 3, he'd actually do a very respectable 302,000. The big problem would be wave 1 and wave 2, where the damage numbers would just be utterly atrocious. So particularly wave 1 there, good luck. That's definitely not a very, very strong thing. If you have the evil niche in play, these numbers start to get a little bit better. Same thing, obviously, with human, though they are a little bit less for wave 1 and a lot more for wave 2, should that be the case. But you can see the definite spike up, as even just in the human niche now, he would have almost 100k extra there over his normal damage. And then man attribute basically conferring some other interesting stuff there from basically Koyan providing that for him. So at least he does, given the fact that he is Buster, get to kind of double dip there with Koyan. It's definitely a nice thing. And you can see if you can manage to get like all of the niche combinations in effect, Sanson could actually start doing some pretty darn insane damage. So watch out for maybe a scenario where it's both evil, human, and man attribute at the same time, and you might see some pretty just disgusting damage. In terms of one-shot damage, that's what the numbers down here below are. It's basically his one-turn damage with a Black Grail. You can see the numbers just immediately, drastically improving as we kind of move on down the list, with human niche being about 574k one-shot damage. That is not bad, and this is using a double Koyanskaya here, so we are at least kind of getting, again, that double man attribute there to be in here. And you can see the combinations of all three would actually result in about 732k neutral damage. So to me personally, this just makes Sanson a lot more viable, but there's definitely some still concerns about like kind of actually being able to use him in practicality, particularly in more of a like either multiple damage dealer setup or an actual 3-turn. I don't think most people would use him in that regard, but let me know your thoughts on that. He's definitely an interesting unit, and this is definitely an interesting buff for him. So let me know what you think he should have gotten if you don't like this buff. Next up here, we have Jack the Ripper. Now, Jack has been maligned for quite a while, mostly due to the existence of units like Kama, who have recently gotten a buff, and the fact that Jack, when she did get an NP interlude, actually only got half an interlude. So the way to understand this is that normally when a unit gets an NP interlude, the NP2 percentile becomes the NP1 percentile, and the NP5 percentile becomes the NP2. So if that were the case when Jack got an NP interlude, she should have had 1600% scaling on her NP. Unfortunately, it seems like they feared Jack, and so Jack only got 1400. So she basically, like in a similar scenario to basically Vlad Berserker. She only got half an interlude. For me personally, I was hoping that that would be what they would address and that they would fix that. It seemed to me to make the most sense would be to give her yet another one that actually just fixes this and gives her the full NP interlude, because that is one of the major things that holds her back. I don't think anybody has ever really disputed the fact that Jack actually has a very good niche being anti-female. It's not super effective. It is a power mod, but that does help out at least on the back end where cards after the NP would still have this effect for the duration of the turn, allowing you to get a little bit more damage against a female enemy. But they basically took Jack's kind of primary skill, which is her first skill, her quick up of 1 turn and her evasion of 1 turn. Now, this is both her survivability and her steroid. And the 50% quick up is definitely nice. It's really good for star generation. It's really good for damage output. But the issue that we have with this is that it is just that single turn. So if the stars don't align for Jack, pun intended, I guess, you're maybe not going to necessarily get some good damage out of her. So now they've come back in and they actually made the change that I've been asking for them to make for years to this skill. And that's that they made the quick up a 3-turn duration. This just helps out her consistency immensely. It gives her what she needs to continue to pop off. They also gave her NP damage of 20% for 3 turns, which is an odd, like, sort of handout here for a unit that they clearly feared the damage on in the past and didn't want to make too powerful. And now they've ignored her for too long, and they actually have to give her a solid damage buff here of 20% NP damage up for 3 turns. So again, as Jack continues to run through an NP, that is going to continue to give you more firepower. And yeah, that's something that an Oberon could definitely double up on and get some good damage out of. It's also going to grant herself evasion for 1 turn as it had before, but now it's going to also charge her NP gauge by 30%. This one was surprising to me. I did not think they would give Jack charge. I figured they'd probably leave her stranded in that regard because, again, the really nice niche that she has and sort of comma being that competition there having charge. But at this point, we can look across pretty much all of our single target assassins, and almost all of them have charge to some degree. So I think this was kind of overdue, and we're at a point in the game basically now where if you have charge, you're good, but if you don't have charge, you're kind of left behind. So I know some people would have maybe preferred for them not to give her charge, but I think this is a good change overall. This will make her more usable, and that 30% will combine very nicely with something like a mana loading append. So this is definitely a good change for Jack, and it's definitely a huge upgrade for her. So what is this upgrade going to do in terms of Jack's refund? So it's not going to change a whole lot for you in general. Remember, you do have the same effects, basically. Naturally, with more damage output, you can maybe hit overkill a little bit easier. But the good thing for her is instead going to be more about the fact that she has the 3-turn duration on things, allowing her to continue to do a, like Noble Phantasm and keep getting back to another one and trying to fire it off again and again. So I really, really, really like that change for Jack in this regard. Like I said, it's just going to help out the consistency, but you guys can see the refund numbers on the screen. She is a single target. She doesn't have a whole lot of hits on the NP, so you don't have to expect that she's going to necessarily start doing some crazy numbers here. Single target quick units usually are in the 10 to 20% refund range. Taking a look at an actual composition for Jack, though, we can make her 3-turn. This would require a Summer Scotty and double Oberon. You could probably sneak in an original Scotty instead of a Summer Scotty here. But the thing you'll denote is that basically we are starting her out with a 50% CE, her mana loading append, and then popping her skill turn 1 to basically bring her up to full. Obviously, you'd have the quick up from Scotty, but you're not going to have anything else. She's going to fire off the Noble Phantasm, get back to 11%, and then you're going to use basically the Summer Scotty's 50% charge. It's going to bring you up to 60. You're going to rotate her out for the other Oberon, pop both Oberons for skills. That should bring you up to full again. Fire off another Noble Phantasm, and then on the third wave, both Oberons basically 50% charges, and that should be enough. Plus, you can throw in their third skill at that point to get the most damage output. But that would be what a kind of forced 3-turn loop with Jack would be like. It's not going to be something like a Black Grail loop or anything like that, but you might be able to make something like that work if you do manage to hinge on Jack's cards, though that'll be a little bit more of an RNG strategy for that. Taking a look at Jack's raw damage numbers, this is no supports, this is still neutral. You guys can see this is basically tantamount to a nice little like 9k bump up against normal enemies, and pretty much the exact same deal in her female niche. So it is a sizable buff considering that is just raw damage, and considering this isn't an NP interlude. So it's definitely another nice change for her in that regard. Taking a look, this is her old damage numbers in a proper composition. So this is now including things like the craft essence, the mystic code, the support units being there. But you can see with the old numbers, she needed basically 2 out of 4 overkill hits in order to be able to loop with double Scotty Oberon and a K-scope. Definitely not the best scenario there, but basically you're able to get to about 264k by wave 3, but that is probably reserving the first skill until wave 3 in order to kind of get that maximal damage value. So that's why you don't see the damage being too high in the earlier waves. Same thing if it's female, you're going to get about 314k, and with NP2 those numbers get bumped up again. In terms of one-shot damage, her number was about 559k out of niche, and then 636k in niche, but still neutral. So here you guys can see Kama's numbers. They're still going to be a little bit higher than Jack's. She's definitely going to be a lot more usable, but this does pull Jack closer in. And I think maybe with that NP interlude in the future, you can see Jack actually being competition here. But yes, I think both one-shot numbers and, you know, again, like in an actual composition, Kama not only just has kind of the better setup, but also just the better damage outright. Same deal. One of the reasons that we saw the insane Kama buff was probably due to Melt. Melt being an alter ego, putting this much pressure on all of the single target cavalry units is not a good thing, in my opinion. I know people like Melt to be really strong, but yeah, we've definitely got some balance issues now. As you guys can see, Melt's damage is also just pretty crack, both in one-turn damage and in terms of actually 3-turning with her. So you can definitely see why they feel the need to buff the single target assassins. Jack definitely needed it. Now with the new numbers, basically you guys can see her numbers are shored up a lot better. Wave 1's still going to be pretty anemic if it's not against a female, but otherwise against females or even by wave 2 already, you can see just the sheer damage increase that she's getting off of this. And then same deal with her one-shot damage. You're getting almost an immediate upgrade where compared to her old numbers, her new raw number is almost as good as her anti-female niche was before, and now you still have the female niche actually on top of that. So again, I really do like this buff for Jack. I think this makes her more usable. I think this gives her more damage to help her compete, and it's definitely going to help out, but we'll have to keep an eye out and see in the future, does she get that NP interlude fix, something that she probably kind of desperately needs at this point. So let me know what you guys think about the buff. Let me know what you would like to see for Jack in the future, and I'm curious how you think the overall progress of the buffs are going so far. Do you like what Lasingle's doing here? Do you like the units that they're picking, or would you maybe have rather them made some other choices on certain days so far? Also, who do you think we're going to be getting for the caster ones coming up here? I'd be really, really curious to hear you guys' thoughts, and I will see you guys for the next video. Thank y'all. Like and follow for Shizzle My Dizzle.